tonight.
I would never say anyone's too old.
The president claps back, targeting Joe Biden.
I am a young, vibrant man. I look at Joe. I don't know about him. I don't know.
After the former vice president's 2020 announcement.
If he looks young and vibrant compared to me, I should probably go home.
And we talked to the president of the National Rifle Association.
I mean, the Bible is full of heroes.
His work exploring how faith is a driving force behind heroes.
And the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Why the president won't be in attendance.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The economy gives President Trump a chance to take a victory lap. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Well, a busy day in Washington. The economy soared, and the quarter is President Trump. He's trying to hash out a trade deal with Japan.
That's right. Bottom line, President Trump had a lot to talk about before heading into the weekend. CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us to break it all down. Ben?
Well, John, Jenna, a trade deal with Japan could actually be in the works after the president met with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe today here behind me at the White House. The deal could give American farmers more access to Japan's markets and even avert tariffs on Japanese cars. This as Japan, China, and Russia work with the U.S. to remove nuclear weapons from North Korea.
I appreciate that Russia and China is helping us, and China is helping us because I think they want to. They don't need nuclear weapons right next to their country. But I also think they're helping us because of the fact that we're in a trade deal, which, by the way, is going very well.
Now, the president was talking about the world's two largest economies that could be close to striking a trade deal. On Sunday, U.S. negotiators head to China for another round of trade talks. The commander-in-chief says President Xi of China will visit the White House soon. If that happens, it will most likely be for a signing ceremony. John, Jenna?
Well, yeah, Ben, Trump also pushed back today on reports that he told former White House counsel Don McGahn to fire Robert Mueller. What can you tell us about that?
Jenny, you're right. President Trump doubled down, saying that is just not true, insisting his team cooperated fully with the investigation, which did find no collusion between his campaign and Russia.
I never told Don McGahn to fire Mueller. If I wanted to fire Mueller, I would have done it myself. It's very simple. I had the right to.
Lawmakers will get another chance next week to ask questions about the final report when Attorney General William Barr is back on Capitol Hill to testify to the Senate. John, Jenna?
And Ben, wrapping up with some good news as we learned this morning, the economy is off to its best start since 2015.
Yeah, John, you're right. The U.S. economy grew 3.2% this quarter alone, exceeding expectations. Trump got the numbers just before boarding Air Force One. Take a listen.
We have great growth and also very, very low inflation. Our economy is doing great, #1 in the world.
Now, with the fastest gains in 3 years, conservatives are now stepping up their support for Stephen Moore. That is President Trump's pick for the Federal Reserve Board. John, Jenna?
All right, Ben Kennedy for us at the White House. Thank you, Ben. Well, more on those new numbers out today that show the economy surging and smashing expectations. Despite concerns of a slowdown, today's Commerce Department's report shows economic expansion grew at 3.2% in the first quarter. Increased exports and inventory investment helped offset slower spending by consumers and businesses in the first 3 months of the year.
Well, he's only officially been in the 2020 race for the White House for 1 day, but already former Vice President Joe Biden and President Trump are each other's favorite targets. At 76 years old, former President Obama's VP would be the oldest person elected to the Oval Office. Currently, right now, that record is held by the current occupant of the White House at 72 years old. Today, the two septuagenarians sparred over just how spry the other is.
I just feel like a young man. I'm so young. I can't believe it. I'm the youngest person. I am a young, vibrant man. I look at Joe. I don't know about him. I don't know. I would never say anyone's too old, but I know they're all making me look Very young, both in terms of age and I think in terms of energy. I think you people know that better than anybody.
If he looks young and vibrant compared to me, I should probably go home. Look, everybody knows who Donald Trump is. And the best way to judge me is to watch, see if I have the energy and the capacity. And I mean, it's just, you know, this is show me business, you know.
So you aren't Sleepy Joe.
That's the first time I've ever been referenced that way by anyone else. It's usually, you know, the other end, Hyper Joe.
Well, age is not the only factor the former vice president has to contend with. For more on the challenges that lie ahead on the 2020 trail, we're joined by Hannah Trudeau, political reporter for the National Journal, and CBN News chief political analyst David Brody. Thank you both for being with us. Hannah, first to you. Let's talk about the age factor. How big of a deal is this?
Well, it can be a big deal if you consider his stumbling a little bit in that View appearance we just saw as a factor of his age. I mean, you know, we kind of are used to seeing Joe Biden come out quite confidently, and he really kind of fumbled a lot of those things. And while I'm not entirely positive that that was because of his age, it could be a factor in his sort of recall or maybe stumbling over his words a bit.
Yeah, the real challenger could be the actual party. I mean, David, this question for you. You know, the party's moved so far to the left, and you see someone like Bernie Sanders, who, by the way, is a year older than Donald Trump. How do you see this playing out?
Well, Bernie might be a year older, but he's already in with the base. He's been progressive for a very long time, and I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, I think it's funny. We have a 72-year-old, a 76-year-old, 77-year-old. What next? A 93-year-old? Everybody, who's vibrant? Who's the most vibrant? That's how it's going to be. We're going to elect the next president of the United States. I agree with Hannah when she was talking about Biden's appearance today. I thought it was rusty. I thought he looked robotic. It didn't look like the Joe Biden that a lot of folks have come to know over time. I thought it was a real problem for him. He wasn't ready with answers to questions that he knew were coming. And so I just thought he was off his game, so it'll take some time.
David, and maybe for both of you, but starting with David, speaking of being ready, the accusations against Joe Biden, the uncomfortable touching and kissing, he can't seem to shake them off, but neither can he seem to offer a real or acceptable apology. Why is that?
Because he doesn't believe it. It's just that simple. He doesn't really want to apologize, and he doesn't think he should. And I think that was pretty clear on The View today. I mean, Joy Behar kept telling him, all you need to say is this. It's like they gave him a fill in the blank, and he couldn't do it. He said, he even shrugged his shoulders at one point and said, all right, look, I'll apologize, you know, if that's what, I mean, literally, it's like he's dragged kicking and screaming to it. So I think it's going to be a problem for him.
Yeah. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, just mentioning Joy Behar, she was a huge Biden fan. Just last year, she mentioned, you know, the exact phrase was, who doesn't love Joe Biden? So he was walking into a very friendly territory. Anna Navarro had just penned an op-ed in his favor. So a lot of these panelists were kind of ready to give him the benefit of the doubt if he were ready to apologize sort of in earnest. And it, like David said, I don't think we saw that.
Yeah. Of course, President Trump, he likes to nickname all of his opponents. He's nicknamed Joe Biden Sleepy Joe. We saw him kind of address that there. Is there a strategy there, Hannah?
Well, I mean, with President Trump, I'm not sure there's ever necessarily a strategy, although the strategy is he loves to nickname people. So
but
I think
it sticks, right?
It sticks, and you know, like Vice President Biden said, I think that was the first time he was ever called that. So maybe he might mix it up. You know, on the trail, he might call him a few different names that maybe he's heard in the past. But I think Sleepy did sort of embody that a little bit on the appearance today, and even in his campaign launch video.
And David, you know, a lot of people are kind of laughing about President Trump's comment about you know, being young and spry and vibrant. But does that actually kind of work for him? Will that kind of become the narrative?
Well, you know, he was doing that in jest today. He's having fun. He's Trump being Trump. The media takes him way too seriously, which I guess he's president. I guess they should take him seriously. But, you know, he's just having fun with that. I didn't quite understand the Sleepy Joe thing. I mean, I guess because he's 77 and he's older than Trump, but you're 72, so, I mean, give me a break. But why not go with, and I'm not suggesting, to the Trump administration, I'm not suggesting this, but look, crazy, he already has Crazy Bernie. He could do Crazy Joe versus Crazy Bernie, and he says either way, you get crazy. I mean, that could be the way they do it. I'm surprised he went with Sleepy Joe. It's like the 7 dwarfs, or the 20 dwarfs, I guess, with all of the candidates that are running. He's got names Sneezy, Jazzy, I don't know, all that stuff.
Hannah, last question here on the money game. Biden said what would be telling is his fundraising ability within the first 24 hours. So what have we learned?
Well, he did top the list of all 20 candidates now, but just narrowly. He raked in something like 6.1 million, I believe it was, and that's just a couple 100,000 more than Bernie Sanders, who is up there in the polls, leading the polls with him. And Beto O'Rourke, who is, just a couple 100,000 below that when you include his general election funds that Biden and Bernie did not raise for. So, they're neck and neck in terms of that, but he gets the bragging rights of that high six figure.
Yeah, it seems like today it's more stylish to have more of a grassroots fundraising game where you bring in $25 donations and $27 donations, not these big donors. Is this going to hurt Joe Biden? It just seems like that's not the way the culture is heading.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that's going to distinguish him from the rest of the pack, and it might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing, and certainly with the more activist progressive base, it's a bad thing. His average donation size so far is in the $40 range instead of the $10 or $20 range. So I think right off the bat we're seeing some of those people who donated to him maxed out at that $2,800 limit that they're allowed to give for the presidential election. So that means a lot of big checks coming in, sort of fewer small donors. With the people who support him already, it might not be a problem, but it might be a problem expanding that base.
David, your thoughts with the small donors, especially within the Democratic base, how does this kind of portend for Biden?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's important, just macro here, he passed the first 24-hour test. It was really important that he at least rival Bernie Sanders in the figure, and he did. He actually surpassed him by a few, 100,000 or so. So that's good, and I think that's what the Biden camp wanted to see, and honestly, it's really what the media wanted to see as well. I mean, so the narrative at least begins to say, hey, Joe is here, he's around to stay. I just wonder if this base has just moved too far left for him. I just think they're going to eat their own. I mean, I really think I think Biden's going to have a real hard time at some point here.
Yeah, and with the economy, it's tough. It's tough to run against a strong economy, no matter who the candidate is. Hannah Trudeau, David Brody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, it is not just the economy that's surging. A potential surge in the number of troops at the U.S.-Mexico border appears to be in the works. The Pentagon is considering sending around 300 more military service members to support the government's ongoing response to the influx of migrants. They would help drive buses and serve meals to support the 2,900 active duty and National Guard troops already there. Defense Department lawyers would also assist to process the migrants. The move requires a policy waiver that prohibits the military from coming into contact with immigrants.
Well, a setback for the pro-life movement. Today, the Kansas Supreme Court ruled that a ban on dismemberment abortion violates the state's Bill of Rights. The court taking the position, that the Kansas State Bill of Rights includes the right to abortion. Pro-life groups are outraged. The National Right to Life releasing this statement saying, quote, dismemberment abortion kills a living unborn baby. By tearing her apart limb from limb, it is unconscionable that the Kansas Supreme Court would allow living unborn babies to be killed in such a gruesome manner.
Well, the president is denying a report that the U.S. paid North Korea $2 million for Otto Wambier's medical care.
Warmbier was an American college student detained by North Korea and died 6 days after he was freed in June 2017. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips has more on the latest with the North Korean regime.
So, Eric, yesterday reports began to surface that North Korea had sent a $2 million hospital bill to the U.S. for Warmbier's care. What can you tell us about those reports? What are you hearing?
Well, Jenna, according to the Washington Post, when a U.S. envoy went to North Korea in 2017 to check on Otto Warmbier and ultimately to try to bring him home, before they were allowed to leave the country with Warmbier, they were told they had to sign a promissory note saying the U.S. would pay $2 million to North Korea for Warmbier's medical care. And the Post says sources close to the situation say the direction for U.S. officials to sign that note came from President Trump himself. But the president is saying, no way.
We did not pay money for our great Otto. There was no money paid. There was a fake news report that money was paid. I haven't paid money for any hostage, and I've gotten approximately, I think it's 20 or 21 out. We don't pay money for hostages. The Otto case was a very unusual case, but I just want to let you know no money was paid.
Poor Otto.
So the president is dismissing this report as fake news. What's interesting, though, to me is that the president denies ever paying anything to North Korea for a hostage to be released. But I've not seen where he denies that the U.S. officials actually signed an agreement to do so.
Eric, this news of the possible payment is like ripping a scab off an old wound, especially for the parents of Otto Warmbier.
Yeah, it really is, because think about it. Warmbier's father says such payment feels like ransom the country may have paid to get his son back. And you've got to look at the history here. Otto Warmbier was in a comatose state for about a year and a half before his family and those in the U.S. were made aware of his status. Then when the U.S. envoy got there to see about him, they received no real explanation of how he wound up in that coma. And to this day, they've still not gotten any conclusive information. Then on top of all of that, President Trump says, although he believes something very bad happened to Otto Warmbier, he doesn't believe North Korean President Kim Jong-un knew about it at the time it was happening. And that's something that the Warmbier family rebukes. So to think that the U.S. paid one thin dime to North Korea to bring Warmbier back home is insulting and hurtful to the family, as well as many others.
Eric, why does President Trump not think Kim Jong-un knew about what may have happened to Warmbier?
Well, Jenna, first of all, he says that the two of them have a very good relationship. And he said that Kim flatly denied knowing anything about what was going on there. And, well, he believes him. And plus, the president says that he doesn't believe Kim would have anything in his best interest to actually have known that this was going on. And that's why he kind of doubts it.
Eric, does it look like this latest report will have any impact on the denuclearization of the North Korean peninsula? We know that talks have been ongoing for some time.
Right, they have been, and talks broke down just a couple of months ago between Kim and the president. But now, you know, we're not really seeing that the talks or that this report is going to have a negative effect or a positive effect, mainly because Trump says it's fake news. But think about it. The timing of this all is very interesting. It broke out yesterday on the day that Kim Jong-un was having a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and the main item on the agenda was denuclearization. So while the potential could have been there for this to derail any ongoing talks, it doesn't look like that's the case. Now, what could derail the talks, though, is if the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, continues to be a part of the process. North Korea has asked that Pompeo not be involved in denuclearization talks because Kim says Pompeo tends to misrepresent North Korea's position. Kim would like to see someone involved who, quote, more carefully and naturally is a better communicator.
Eric, just a few seconds left here, but what about the summit yesterday between Kim and Putin? How much of an impact do we think they'll have?
Well, long term, it's yet to be seen. But we know that President Putin communicated with the White House everything that was discussed. And we know that Putin tried to nudge Kim toward denuclearization. We're all standing by to see if the talks lead to any positive change.
All right. Eric Phillips reporting. Thank you so much, Eric. When we come back, the president of the NRA explores faith's role in making heroes. Stay tuned.
Well, we often talk and dream about heroes, but what does it take to actually be one? And what role does a person's faith play?
Oliver North attempts to answer those questions in a new television series. CBN's Jennifer Wishon explains.
As a Marine and son of war veterans, Colonel Oliver North says he spent most of his life in the company of heroes. Now, as president of the National Rifle Association, he's taking his passion for telling their stories to NRA TV. And so far, each episode of Oliver North's American Heroes highlights men and women of faith facing risk to help others.
I mean, the Bible is full of heroes. And you see the purpose of that being related to us is to inspire us to be better than we otherwise might be.
He's shining light on people like Jason Brown, a pro football player turned farmer.
Jason Brown was the highest paid center that ever played in the NFL. And he looked at himself in the mirror one morning and he said, you know, I'm making all this money. I've got the fame, I've got the fortune. He's got the size, as you can tell. And said, I need to do something to give back.
CBN News also caught up with Brown at his First Fruits farm, where he grows food for people in need.
His faith is palpable. Doesn't wear it on his sleeve, But what he does with his faith is show the kind of response that you get to the opportunities the good Lord puts in front of you.
You know, one of the things that strikes me about Jason Brown is the clarity and commitment he has to what he's been called to do. Are those common traits among heroes?
Commitment is something that's absolutely essential to carrying out the purpose that the good Lord put for us here on this earth.
In his most recent episode, North highlights the heroic duty of Tanner Primer. The video you have of Tanner Primer is difficult to watch.
It is. I mean, if you know what's about to happen, here, and this is a maritime deputy sheriff, and down at Cape Canaveral, this is where he's based, there's a very narrow ship channel to get those enormous cruise ships in and out, and you can see it on the video. The pilot sounds the horn that there's danger. 2 girls have fallen off a jet ski, and he takes his boat right in front of the cruise ship, which can't stop, and you see that shadow coming up. An extraordinary act of heroism.
There's a moving part of that episode where you get emotional.
Do you pray?
I do, every day.
I asked her if she prayed, and I told her a story about what a wife had told me when we were in the armor business. I made armor. My patents are in armor. And we both got choked up about it. But that's another common characteristics of all of these. These are people of great faith.
But North fears these days the word hero doesn't mean as much.
You know, you say the word hero and somebody has visions of somebody wearing a spandex suit and a cape. Well, my heroes wear flak jackets and combat boots and flight suits, and they carry guns and badges, and they go to work in danger every day.
And he considers keeping company with them one of the great blessings of his life. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
The White House Correspondents' Dinner is an event nearly 100 years in the making. Up next, why President Trump is sitting it out.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Well, this weekend, America's top journalists descend on Washington for the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner.
That's right. It's one of the Capitol's most glamorous events, but over the years, it's gotten a bit of a bad rap. Here once again is senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon to explain how all of these journalists are in charge of it, are working to repair some of that damage.
It had become a mismatch of Washington and Hollywood, a platform for aspiring comedians, the chance for presidents to let loose.
I was going to start off tonight telling some self-deprecating jokes, but then I couldn't think of any mistakes I had made to be self-deprecating about.
But lately, just about everyone who attends the dinner has been asking themselves the same question.
I mean, really? What is this dinner?
It's supposed to be a celebration of the First Amendment, but morphed into Hollywood types complaining about having to hobnob with reporters. And it all hit a fever pitch last year when clever comedic zingers turned personal.
And I'm never really sure what to call Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You know, is it Sarah Sanders? Is it Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Is it Cousin Huckabee? Is it Auntie Huckabee Sanders? Like, what's Uncle Tom but for white women who disappoint other white women?
And an abortion joke made even staunch advocates cringe.
Mike Pence is also very anti-choice. He thinks abortion is murder, which, first of all, don't knock it till you try it. And when you do try it, really knock it. You know, you gotta get that baby out of there.
So the association hit reset and invited a new type of entertainer, a historian. No, a really cool, esteemed one. Neither President Trump nor his staff are attending, so it feels like a low-key year. And ironically, by Monday, the association hopes headlines about this year's dinner will be much more positive.
Obama out.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Yeah, Maybe it's a good thing they don't have a comedian this year.
Yeah, some might say there's nowhere to go but up from last year.
Yeah, we'll hope.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great weekend.